Okay. Hey, well, welcome everyone. In this classroom session, I wanted to briefly discuss everything about lenses because that's going to be the focus of this week, and we're going to be scene building. So a bit of knowledge about lenses is always a good thing. Again, I'm not an authority when it comes to lenses. I'm definitely not an expert, but it's just from my observation and what the correlation that I make between lenses and perspective that might be able to help you in your own drawing. And so what we'll do is we're going to look at why different lenses are used. So I have some movie examples here, but the same thing goes for animation or even art. I'm going to show some art later in the classroom. So we're going to make a distinct difference why there's a difference in the use of lenses, and then see what the correlation is between lenses and perspective. And then we're going to see how you can actually apply that in your own scenes as you'll be able to do this assignment cycle. All right, so jumping right into it, why do we use different lenses? Well, the thing is, as storytellers or, artists, whether that's cinematography, photography, 2D artists, doesn't really matter. We're always trying to make our audience connect with what we're displaying, whether that's emotionally or, personally or visually. We're always trying to convey a certain feeling, okay? And so we can do this in a number of different ways, as you all know, right? We can do that through mood, color, composition, whatever. And so this is things that help us make that image clear. But we can also do it through lenses, and that's of course specifically with cinematography because they actually use physical lenses. But we can use perspective in a manner that mimics those lens behaviors, okay? And so if we look at a wide-angle lens, what it basically does is it gives us the opportunity to get really close to a certain subject, but still make us aware of the surroundings of that subject, right? And what that is able to do is, when it comes to actors, for instance, as you can see in this scene, it gives us the opportunity to really show the emotion of the actor while still informing us about the environment in which that actor sits. Okay, and this is the same for your subject or your character that you're painting in your illustration. If you're using a wide-angle view, you can still inform the viewer of the surroundings in which your character or characters are standing without too much loss of detail, right? We'll look at the long lens later, but if we compare that to the long lens, which we can also zoom into a character, everything else gets really blurred. So we're not really getting informed about the surroundings. We're really focused on the character at hand. So the wide-angle lens is actually a pretty informative lens. It also warps our perspective, of course. So it gets a very fantastical feeling. We can see, especially with the wide-angle lens, we can see that it's not real, okay? It's not natural to our eyes. It's something that's there to invoke some kind of drama and inform us about the scene. Especially if you look at this scene from Reservoir Dogs, the intent here is to feel as if you are lying in the back of this car, in the trunk, while still seeing all three characters in the scene, somewhat of the environment, and also just the hood of that trunk, right? That's almost impossible to do with any other kind of lens. So we're getting a whole lot of information in just one image. Now, if we then go to a standard or medium lens, when we talk about standard or medium lenses, photographers or cinematographers usually range that between a 35 millimeter to a 70, but probably less than 70 millimeter lens. And so what this does according to experts, is it mimics our natural view or our natural point of view that we have as humans, like the best, right? It's the closest that we can get to our natural viewing point. And so what this does is that it immerses us in the scene as if we are part of it, right? As if we are standing in the scene or sitting in the scene or actually participating in the scene. Whereas with the wide angle, we're more overlooking the scene, or, you know, being somewhat of a spectator, but we're not actually participating in the scene, right? And so as you'll see in cinematography, what they'll often do is that when we have intense conversations between characters, or they want to evoke some kind of emotional response from the viewer, they'll use these lenses in order to immerse you in the scene as if you're part of it, right? Because that makes us connect with the scene much more, as if instead of when we're just, you know, looking over the scene. And then going to the long lens, again, what the long lens does, it's also a type of manipulation of reality, right? So it's not actually what we see with our natural eye. It's also a compression of reality. Now, where the wide-angle lens gives us a very, very distorted view of reality with a lot of depth creation, the long lens actually compresses a lot of our depth. And what that does, when a lot of things get compressed, because there's a really long lens, because if you want to shoot something with this lens, you have to take a long distance from the subject. And we'll look at that a bit after in the next slide. But so you have to really increase your distance to the subject, and that compresses the depth between the elements in the scene. And so what that does is it creates a sense of drama. And especially for cinematographers, but also in art, as I'll show examples later, is that it's a really nice excuse to start playing with composition, because we are moving much more into the graphic realm of things instead of just creating a scene, right? It's actually the placement of elements becomes increasingly important in these long lens shots, because we need to frame our subjects, because we don't have the luxury of depth, right? And so what this does is it creates a lot of drama, especially suspense when you do a close-up on a character like you see here, or it creates something really nice and graphically, as you can see here, where everything is carefully thought out about how this scene should look and where the elements are placed. And so if we zoom out again, and we look at the goal of each one, is that a wide angle is mostly used for like interaction with the audience, where the motion is primarily in relation to the surrounding. And so what you'll often see, especially when a movie begins or a new scene begins, you'll have what they call an establishing shot. And an establishing shot is made usually with a wide-angle lens, because it gives us an overview, a wide overview of everything in the scene, the surrounding, the environment, wherever we are. And it gives us as much information as it can about that surrounding, right? And so that's why they call it an establishing shot. And so that's a very informative sort of view. And then when we go into the standard medium, it's more about connection with the viewer itself, with your audience, right? You want to make a personal connection, a very emotional connection. So it's an emotion in relation to other people. And then with the long lens, we are really doing that for drama and appeal. So the emotion is in relation to the situation or others. Now, the appeal comes to, and a lot of directors say this, when you want to make your actors look appealing or, very attractive, they often opt for a long lens, because it kills the depth of the image, which makes facial features a lot more symmetrical and nice looking. And so that's why actors look more appealing in those long lens compressed shots. And like with the arrow, what I did, that, as you can see down below, is that from wide angle to long lenses, we go from being very informative to more graphic, right? Now, I'm not saying that wide angle lenses can be graphic. They certainly can be, but it becomes increasingly important with a long lens to make a very nice graphic composition. And we'll see this in an example later on. So what's the relation between perspective and lenses then? All right, thank you all for watching. If you've enjoyed this clip, make sure you head over to artwatt.com, where we have a lot more of this content, along with classrooms to accompany each of these assignment cycles, tutorials, a complete beginner's course for you to enjoy and get you up and running with the program. We have an amazing community on Discord where I'm very active. We do online doodle sessions. We do live classrooms that are recorded. We have some great support teachers. So if you want to get access to all of that, make sure you visit artwatt.com and I will see you there. Bye-bye.